years, but we truly displayed. Captain McCormick, almost like Johnny Carson, would display people, almost like Johnny Carson. We were so deeply privileged. Yeah, I'm going to hog the mic just a little bit. In hockey, we used to call it a puck hog, a hog. But I'm going to take maybe 2 minutes tops here to hog my own mic on my own show. Remember, Captain, my radio is not a democracy. It's a dictator. And guess who's the dictator, Captain? I don't write anything down. Val will attest to this. I don't write notes or whatever. But I do sometimes. I'll do this. I'll do envelope, right? Mail. It's like just a little mailing envelope. I like doing my to-do list on that because I can fold it in half and put it in my pocket. I had only a few things I wanted to make sure that I shared on my show today. One is a little bit of analytics. I'm an analytics junkie, and this is just kind of FYI for Captain McCormick. My wonderful, happy YouTube channel, great Meakin, just went over 1 million impressions and a few days ago. And as of this moment, 1009042. So we've had like 9,000 impressions in the last week or so. Secondly, I just want to share my heart while I know I have the mic. And it's called Burning Desires in the AA program, Burning Desires. Here's my burning desire. And I think I've communicated with him a number of times in the past. But this heartfelt burning desires directly to President Donald J. Trump, who I describe as 45, 46, 47, changed my mind. So there are burning desires. I only have a few of them, and I want to get them on the record because I can. I don't care what process is. I don't care what goes on up in that politics. James, I wouldn't be in Washington, D.C. for $1 million right now. Maybe $1 million, but maybe. Anyhow, number one, to President Trump. I don't know how it works. It's too complicated for me. If it takes an executive order, that's fine. But I want Captain James McCormick to receive the Medal of Honor yesterday. There are other people. There's tons. And these are Desmond Doss kind of guys. These are James McCormick kind of guys. These are Eddie Floyd kind of guys. These are Sammy Davis kind of guys. And I don't really care how it works. If I could see Forrest Gump, who is Sammy Davis, receive the Medal of Honor, I could see James do that. My only caveat and condition is when Trump puts that on your over your neck, Captain, when he does that, I want to be present in the press corps with Miss Val, our military Val, radio gal. That's it. So that's number one. And again, I don't care what the process is. Secondly, I'd like Val Olson to receive a Social Security number. That's what I'd like. If President Biden could dole out 4 million Social Security numbers to people who've never spent 5 minutes in the country, then he can dole out one Social Security number. That means she's a U.S. citizen. No one can mess with her anymore, okay? Because she's under the protection of the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Last bastion of freedom in the world. I never thought I'd ever say that coming from Canada, but Canada left me. So Social Security number for Val Olson, that's number 2, and of course her family. A last question is I'd request that President Trump review the open letter that I know he has in his hands to Premier Daniel Smith in Alberta. And I encourage President Trump to encourage Daniel Smith to call a referendum for AB 51 now, like sooner or later. Just maybe 45, 60 days, enough to be able to do some marketing, unlike the election up there right now. It's called a snap election. So it doesn't have to be a snap referendum, but give the nice folks up there who've been working their butts off, okay, for sometimes decades. Right there. That's Michael Mandeville right there, receiving his Alberta 51 hockey jersey. Val, you're a magician. It's almost like you have an Alberta file or something. So I'd encourage Danielle Smith to call a referendum up and down. Do you want to be the 51st state of the United States? Yes or no? This time around, it can't be undecided because you actually have to bloody vote. You have to lift a finger, go to the polls, and vote. But you pull the curtain across just like you do in the United States. And even if you're pretending to be something else, like Trump posters, I wrote about it. Those were Hillary Clinton voters, Trump posters, who would say publicly they voted for Hill, but they voted for Donald Trump behind the curtain. So would you call an up or down referendum? Because I know she can. And then just go from there. So would you do that? So that's to President Trump. And I'll just leave off and thank him and his staff for monitoring my programs in the past. First one was MAGA Matters with you, Captain. And thank him for that. And if he ever gets an opportunity, if he could plug my book, that would be great. That'd be great. Why I came to America and what I think now. This is my talking point, my call to action of the day. I've imposed, I think I told you this, Captain. I think I told you this, Val. I've imposed a 100% tariff on myself. My ebook, which I priced at $5, mainly for Captain McCormick's 200,000 military veterans that follow him and that we went out to radio one night, mainly for those 200,000 guys. And there's more. There's about 1 million. There's about 1 million that follow Captain McCormick, including the president and past presidents. But I imposed a tariff on my own book where it's not going to be $5 anymore. It's going to be $10, $9.99. I'll decide what day that tariff is going to be imposed. But that's my call to action. Get it before it's gone. Get it before tariffs are imposed. And the funny thing is, I've had ebook orders from Canada, from England, and from Australia, whatever. I love that. So those are my burning desires of the show. I'm going to turn the show actually back to Val. Whatever kind of you want. I also want to hear, and I'll comment on anything and answer questions, but I do want to hear Captain James McCormick also do not a wrap up. We never like to say wrap. We like to say à la prochaine in Quebec, which means until next time. I definitely want to give you the floor again, Captain McCormick. I'm just, and including Sheriff Mark Lamb, who's now a private citizen, so he's a freelancer, including him dropping in today. It means so much more, as you know, than we know. And what I like, I'm going to give him a hard time about this, is he was really dressed up. Did you see how gussied up he was? Got the cowboy hat, but he had a nice jacket on and stuff. So he must have been doing an important engagement once again. People don't know, and counting, it was like 11 or 12 times that he'd been to the White House visiting with President Trump, much like you, Captain. So Mike, back to Val, summary, fun chit chat, whatever. And then of course back to Captain for his thoughts. You're on mute, Val.
Thank you.
Sorry to always be producing the show. Okay, you've really behaved today, Val. You really you didn't call one person a communist. You didn't call one person a communist today, but give it time. Go ahead, Val.
No, I just echo what Greg's saying, and thank you so much. And it's just incredible, the response from President Trump. I know that there's many Albertans that are submitting their victim impact statements, and they are CCing the Department of Justice. They are CCing the FBI. I spoke to a mother who made it across, who's in the United States. She's living basically in her car going across the country and talking about how her child has been stolen and trafficked by the government. And so to be able to get these stories to the United States is so, so powerful. There's so much hope in that. I'm really sad and disappointed that the premier of a province has not looked at an open letter and how easy it was to get it in the hands of the president of the United States, but still the premier of the province of Alberta, still since St. Paddy's Day, has not been able to open her mail. That's disappointing. That just shows a government that is out of control, rogue, off off the radar, off the rope. So we'll see what happens. But thank you, Captain James, for all that you do in DC, for how you represent. We're thankful. I'm blessed to be here today. So no more
What are you
mic
holding in
time
your
for
hand?
me.
What are you holding in your hands, Val? I
Oh,
just wanted to ask.
this is a
That.
copy.
Oh, that.
Right. Yeah, that's a copy of the letter that Greg drafted actually and sent to the Premier of Alberta. And still we know it's confirmed she has not taken the time to even look at it, but yet the President of the United States has this open letter.
Hey, Val,
Incredible.
why don't you read just the first paragraph or two? This is fun. This could be a reading assignment. Remember, usually reading assignments are to like fourth graders. Go second graders this time because we're going to be dealing with some people from Toronto here. Okay, so go second grader. Go
Well,
ahead.
for those of you following at home, you can find a copy of this letter on Greg's website, gregmeakin.com. This was drafted to the Premier, Danielle Smith. It arrived at the legislature March 17th, 2025. Dear Premier Smith, it is with warmest wishes from Arizona and deepest respect for you and the wonderful people in Alberta that I pen this open letter. I am writing to urge you to declare a provincial referendum for Alberta 51 and offer my thoughts and predictions below. And I'm going to leave it there because it's just a tease. I don't want to read all of it. I want you to, but most importantly, if you're watching and you have you can put an APB out on the Premier of Alberta, let her know she's got to do her homework. She's behind the ball here. So she has a copy of it. You can get it to her if she is within wireless or internet capability. She can find it on Greg's website. So gregmeakin.com. Back to you, Captain James. I'm going to give the microphone to you.
Sure. It's a very important, freedom is an important thing. Having the freedom to be able to do the things. I mean, I've been in countries where freedom didn't exist. Women didn't have the freedom to walk in public without wearing a burqa. Kids were dying because there was no freedom to have education. There were a lot of things that were going on. So I definitely feel that love for freedom and the fact that you all are here. And you came here through a process. You didn't just storm the border or swim the river. You didn't come in with a bunch of, through a coyote or any of that. So there is a process that gets you here. You know what I mean? And no one has ever said, you know, don't let people legally immigrate to America, because we have always supported that. And I think the fact that you all are here on different, types of either visas or, citizenship is a great thing. What's going on in Canada, and we've heard the president. That's one of the first things the president's really started talking about. He talked about Greenland, talked about Canada, uh, and there we are. Those discussions are around freedom. You know what I mean? And so it's like, here you have a president of the United States of America that is not saying we're going to mandate, make you become part of America. We're not invading Canada or we're not invading Greenland. But he's simply saying, give the people a choice. If you're truly a democracy, if you're truly, as you claim, a free country, then give the people a choice. And why would you not give the people a choice? And why would you not have an election that says yes or no? Not maybe, not I'm not sure, not maybe in 10 years, but yes or no. And then you make the decision. And those that don't want to make the decision, they won't vote. They just won't go vote. But if you get more than 1/3 of your population that vote, number one, that's a great thing. If you can get at least 1/3 of your registered voters to vote, and you don't go in and say, well, I know these people are, pro 51st, So we'll do something to not allow them to vote. You know, that voter interference that you see happens. You show up, well, your signature doesn't exactly match. I mean, we've seen it here in America. It occurred before. You know what I mean? It occurred. It occurred, as you know, in 2020. It occurred and tried to occur in 2024. So we know, you know, we've seen these things. It's not as widespread as I believe that some people believe it to be, but it's just enough to impact elections. And the fact that we shine this great big spotlight on it, and President Trump went through that 4-year cycle, shining a light on it, is important, because what it did is it opened people's eyes, and it's like, okay, we're on notice, and people are watching. The American people, the Canadian people, they're watching. They know, you know, they'll be watching this show and they'll say, you know, why don't you just give us a choice? You know, I mean, you know, to me, I think that is a sign of tyranny if they don't even give you an opportunity to even vote, whether you do it or not, but at least give the people a chance to say yes or no. You know, and
And
that's the
don't
part
say
that
it.
I struggle with.
And don't say it can't happen. I just don't want to hear about that. Okay.
Yeah,
Right
yeah,
now,
yeah.
just yes or no. Doesn't matter whether it can happen or not.
Sure.
You jarred my memory because you talked about a third of the electorate showing up,
Mhm.
Captain. You know,
Yeah,
elections inside and out. We're down in Arizona. We're burned out on loser elections.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, but so I'll reference just one thing. I rarely put this up on camera. This is actually a file. It's actually a file I've referenced. That's actually the referendum, my forensic poll from 2 years ago, from it closed down July 31st, 2023. And to answer you, just kind of for data,
Hmm.
the last time we had, and they're free, from what I see, they run them real well. The Alberta elections where Daniel Smith was elected. So it was a pure, there's roughly 5 million people
Sure.
in Alberta. Uh, According to the data, 2.840924. So 2.8 million people are registered to vote.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actual valid votes cast, 1.763441.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
This is over 50% action. Okay.
Mhm.
And what I really liked, and I don't know, I'd like to get some kind of internal Alberta polling on this. What I really liked was the disclosure within 24 hours after that election. 745 declined ballots, so they're just garbage.
Yeah.
8,138 rejected ballots, so they considered it, whatever. Don't know the
Sure.
process, whether it was signature, so 2.8, 8138 of those. Unofficial turnout, 62.39, and then there are numbers in the high 50s, depending on who you look for. So what's interesting, I'll just, since I'm just blabbing the time, I'd heard a while back how many political parties were in the United States. There's like 32 parties that are registered in the United States. I did a piece on that. But in this case, this is interesting. In Alberta. Now, this is for the last election, Captain. This is for the last election. It went down. Every single voter had ID. They're registered. They're blah, blah, blah. But get a load of these parties. I like this just for, if anything, for the time stamping it. Let's start at the top. Eligible parties you could vote for in the last election. Advantage Party of Alberta. Alberta Liberal Party. Alberta New Democrat Party. Alberta Party. This is great. This is terrible marketing. Anyway, my favorite, Communist Party of Alberta. It's my favorite. 377 votes. Anyway, Green Party of Alberta. Pro-Life Alberta Political Association. Reform Party of Alberta. Solidarity Movement of Alberta. The Buffalo Party of Alberta. 106 votes for the Buffalo Party. The Independence Party of Alberta, the United Conservative Party of Alberta. That was one of the bigger ones. 927,453 votes voted Daniel
Wow.
Smith as the premier. 927 plus. Here's one. Wild Roads Independent Party of Alberta. That's familiar to Val. They got 825 votes. And then the last one, I love this. A Canadian, just in case none of these worked. Okay, the Independents. Independent. So what did you count, Captain?
14.
You're right. You're right. So
14.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in there just
sure,
to localize it a little bit? Because I'm a little bit of a numbers junkie and data junkie, and I remember all that stuff. So Danielle Smith actually is not only premier, she is my politician. She's my MLA. So, if I was to run again, I mean, I lost the first time, but if I was to run against her in my own riding, I was told I lost by 306 votes. I think it had to do with that hit piece because I was supporting Donald Trump back then. So there's a little number there. But for Danielle Smith to win her UCP leader race, it took them 6 times to count until it was declared she was winner. They had to count the votes 6 times. And on the 6th time of counting who's the leader of the United Conservative Party, they determined it was Danielle Smith. So I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't have a lot of confidence if it took them 6 times to count me in as the leader of the party. But I mean, that's, just nuts and bolts kind of stuff. But
it sounds like a Chicago election in the inner city, right, Captain? They stuffed the ballot box.
I don't know.
to elect.
Well, look,
JFK.
I'm going to tell you that happened in the Deep South as well, right after the Civil War.
Yeah.
You got to understand, it was the Republican Party, it was the Republicans of Lincoln that fought against the Confederacy, the Democrats of the Old South. And, they were the most, obviously they were racist. They believe in enslaving an entire, race of people. They did it the same way. Listen, let me tell you, they did a number on Irish Americans. They did a number on American Indians, ungodly things that was done to them. Um, Probably, I would tell you, when I look through my family history, I came from an Irish American Indian background because the Irish, when they came over, you know, as my grandmother would tell me, no decent white person would marry an Irish person. You know what I mean? So that's what they would say. So they either married into the African American community or they married in to the American Indian community, and that's what happened. And the product of that is guys like James McCormick and so many others. So, I'm just going to tell you that this ballot box stuffing was bad in the South, in the Deep South, really bad in the Deep South. Now that changed, obviously. They did a flop, where the Democrats, under FDR and JFK and some of those, what I would say your more prominent, leaders, something happened during the Clinton administration that I believe that started the downward spiral. It really shot into hyperdrive under Barack Obama, to where you saw more people. When I was a kid growing up, if you ever openly professed that you were a communist, you'd get beat up. Look, the Russians were still our enemy.
That's right.
And they still are, by the way. Don't you ever forget that. The Russians and the Chinese, they're still your enemy. And the North Koreans and the Iranians. But through all of that political corruption, there's one group that continues to come out, and that is the so-called quote unquote liberal group. It's the liberal group is the only group that would embrace Al Qaeda, that will embrace Hamas. They do. They embrace them.
Yeah.
They embrace communism. They embrace socialism, things that run afoul against the U.S. Constitution and what we stand for as Americans. They embrace slavery. You know what I mean? They were a liberal party. They embraced slavery. They weren't the party of back then. You know what I mean? They were a very liberal.
We need to remind people in schools that Republicans were formed. The party was formed to free the slaves.
That's
The
exactly why
KKK,
they were formed.
and it's documented. And
Yeah.
the KKK, those were our Democrats. Republicans
Yeah.
voted to give women the right to vote.
Yeah. Well, and
Um,
look, that's a fact. And they killed Abraham Lincoln. Okay.
that's right. That's right.
Now, they cut off their nose to spite their face, because had they kept Abraham Lincoln alive, had he not been murdered at Ford Theater by an assassin, a Confederate assassin, who was also a very well known Democrat, okay, named John Wilkes Booth,
Right.
and if that had not happened.
I'm sorry, to people up in Montreal, the South created a slush fund that was based in Montreal, where Booth would travel up to Montreal, dude, and that's where they did the Confederate money transactions.
Mhm.
Canada was such a safe haven, of course, but yeah,
Well,
Booth
sure,
went up
yeah,
there.
yeah.
He went up there to pick up the money. I think it was like $1,600 to fulfill the assassination. There you go.
Well, there you go. There's a piece of that history.
Yeah.
But had they not murdered Abraham Lincoln and allowed Vice President Johnson to become the president, Lincoln said, "We're going to let him up easy." That's what he said. They said to play Dixie at the celebration in honor of their enemy, to give them grace and allow them to rejoin the Union. He was going to allow the slaves in the South, the freed people in the South, to go back to Africa if they wanted to. Now, some people say that's an unpopular decision that he was making, but that's a very true statement. He was giving them the option.
Right.
Okay. Right. He was going to also, he's the one that came up with the 40 acres and a mule. And I believe that he would have fulfilled that promise wholeheartedly had he not been assassinated. So understand, in April of 1865, everything got changed because they killed the man who was making the promises. Now, when the vice president got in, he said, we are going to make them, he says, we are going to make them feel the weight of our boot. And he did. And he put an occupation army in the South till 1877, primarily African American troops that were down there. They put people in positions, and they didn't just defeat them, but then they unleashed the whole carpetbaggerman group of people.
Mm-hmm.
The carpetbaggers had no loyalty to America. They had no loyalty to anybody but themselves. And a lot of them became millionaires. So a lot of the big landowners, and they were ultimately, they were pro themselves, and they really were probably pro slavery as well, because when they got over and they bought all these plantations, because taxes foreclosed on these people, and they bought them for pennies on the dollar. And then they turned them into these great big corporations, you know what I mean? And they went right back into the cotton industry and all these things. Right. And they just found a different group of people to enslave. Okay. And they found a different group of people to force, they still become the masters. And you see this whole work through the Industrial Revolution of the 1890s, and then all the way up to the Great Depression, and all these things happen. All of that came from corruption in politics. You kill the president, you put the person in there that you want in there, and then you stuff the ballot boxes and you elect the local officials who will carry out your wills. That's how you take over. And that's what happened. And for the longest time, they were all called Dixiecrats. The Democrats were called Dixiecrats. And then somewhere,
that's right,
I'm going to say after Clinton, because it was pretty much still a safe haven if you were a Democrat and you espoused the JFK views, you were going to get elected. And they weren't that bad. People actually communicated and talked. But when you had Obama get in, oh buddy, changed.
My commentary in the past, I've said this a million times, Captain, is everything changed, yes, indeed, with Clinton. Why? He was the first boomer president coming out of the 60s campuses. Mm-hmm. The New Age movement calls it moral relativism, historical revisionism, one world government, single currency, get Jesus out of our lives. Men are crap. Archie Bunker was the first campaign to say that men are crap. So I think again, just to touch base, always generationally. I think Bill Clinton started it, and I'm just going to say, I've never said this publicly before. There's no question, and I say even statistically, Barack Obama was the most divisive president in our generation.
Yeah,
Just the
absolutely.
word is divisive. That means simply uh, dividing us. Captain, comments on that?
Yeah, no, look, I've said what I've said, and I mean it, and it's historically accurate to make that
Right.
statement.
Right.
And President Biden, at whatever point that he was ever really in charge, I don't know. Okay, but I do know that it's the minions. It's the minions that are there. It's the people behind the screens, behind the curtains that are doing
Yeah.
all of these things. And if you go and you dig into them, you see these very deep rooted, they are pushing forward their personal agendas and not the
Right.
agenda of the American people or the
That's
desire
right.
of the American people. That's why you don't have a vote in Alberta, because then you have to put forward the will of the people. What if they say, yes, we want to become the 51st state of the United States of America? And if they do, then you don't follow through with that. Then what are you? You're not following through. You're not taking care of your constituents. It's the same thing. Just look, making abortion, all right,
Here we go.
a state issue, okay?
Mhm.
If you go through so we have all of our amendments, the 10th Amendment, which is basically says everything that is not specifically mentioned. Abortion was never mentioned in the Constitution or in any of the papers that were written. But so therefore, it falls upon the states to make that decision. So what happens if you don't want the states to make the decision and you want to control what the people do and say, is you say, I'll make it a federal law and you have no choice. So then you have Roe v. Wade. Then Roe v. Wade gets turned over and you say, people of America, we're going to take it back to what the Constitution really said
Mhm.
is you get to vote. Now, we're not saying you can't have an abortion, but you just
Sure.
can't have an abortion here. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? And if
Yeah.
you travel out your state to get an abortion and you follow the rules of whatever that state is, I've heard all this. Well, they're going to arrest you when you come back. Did you
Sure.
break laws? Baloney. That's not happened. If you break laws, they'll arrest you if you're speeding, but they don't look, the states decide. If you want to have one, fly to California, fly to
Sure.
New York City, whatever. You know what I
You
mean?
know,
Those states
Captain,
allow it.
in my travels and mentoring, I've talked to one in particular, Generation X female that I really admire, and she's up in the Seattle area. And I asked her, I said, I
Yeah.
just hear so much in the press, access to abortion, blah blah. I said, does any woman seriously? Do you not have access to abortions right now? It seems like they're marketing it like Amway. Am I missing something here? And she says,
I,
no,
I
no.
would leave, I would leave, I would ask Val, the only woman that's on this radio show,
There
what
you
her
go.
thoughts are on that.
Well, I think it's a slippery slope. We offer abortions for free um, in Canada, so that you can have them on demand. So there's no standard and there's no morals. And I was coached as I was called my last one that I had, number three. I had her at age 36, I believe, and that put me in a category of a geriatric pregnancy. So they told me no matter what, I would fall into a category where I would have all these, increased risks, et cetera, et cetera. And it's very scary. So the language and messaging of the government is not one of a vision for a future life, value of life. It is exactly opposite of that. And I know personally, I was coached the opposite way. You're at an age where, do you even want this? Can you handle this? And they make it so easy to terminate a pregnancy, and the messaging around it is so dangerous that culturally it just becomes socially acceptable. And now Canada is very much a death culture, whether it's MAID, whether it's on demand abortions. I mean, we make China blush when truth, if you really want to put human right violation to human right violation or the value of life, Canada and China, I think in some cases, people would be shocked, especially US lawmakers, when they start finding out that people from other countries come to Canada specifically to have abortions because not only will the government pay for it, it's free, but we do gender selection. So some cultures, they don't want to have a female baby. So they find out it's, it's a female. We'll just go to Canada. They'll give you an abortion on demand. No questions asked. And that's how it goes. It's very, very simple. The government is there to hold your hand if you choose death. And you can't talk to these people after it's done because guess what? They're dead. So there's no follow up. There's just bodies stacking up, baby bodies, elderly bodies, soldier bodies. It's really bad. So as for the US, my advice here is it's a slippery slope. I can tell you what it looks like, what's happening at the neighbor's farm, so to speak. We're on the other side of the 49th. This is where it goes. This is how the bodies stack up. But local decision making is key. And I choose life. So I believe in choice and I choose life. And that isn't allowed. So if you stop and think about that for a second, I believe that a doctor shouldn't make a decision for me, that it should be a local, personal decision. And I choose life. And that isn't accepted. They say choice is accepted, but not when you pick life. So
right.
Come back to the Constitution. Remain, like you said, James, it's already written in the Constitution what we require. So you don't go making these things federal, you make them local, and it starts with standards in your community. So if you are a Bible-believing, gun-carrying, freedom-minded state, you've got nothing to worry about. And chances are you're going to grow. You have a vision for the future. You've elected like-minded politicians. Right. So don't worry about it. Just stand straight and say, I choose life. Deal with it.
Yeah.
Val, because you always said from the very beginning, I'm pro-choice. I choose life. In my book, Why I Came to America and What I Think Now, I dealt with it briefly, the abortion issue. I don't usually like, again, slippery slope. One thing I concluded is a few things, though. We're different. Roe v. Wade. We're a different country now than 1972 as far as medical technology, number one. Hello.
Sure.
We can say babies, that little babies. Anyhow, that's number one. Number two, I am a true libertarian state rights guy with limited federal laws.
Yeah.
Again, but, and I'm also not a national referendum guy. Like in the U.S. doesn't do national referendums like they do up in Canada. But I would be in one case, and I put it in the book. I said, the only thing I see is that Roe v. Wade protects late-term abortions. That's the only kind of advantage I see, a quote advantage. And I'm saying I would do a national referendum. I do not. This one, there's only about 2 or 3 subjects I would do this on. One's education. National referendum on banning late-term abortion. Period. All 50 states. Hello. That's it. You can't drive until you're 16. You literally ban late-term abortions. That little. And I don't care why or how or when. I heard a trauma surgeon said there's no such thing as the life of the mother. We try to save everybody every minute. We save both most of the time. We don't sit and choose as a surgeon. So my national referendum banning late-term abortions, that's all I'll say on that slippery slope. But I'm going to let you, James, close it out a little bit. We now have hit our record. We're over 3 hours and 17 minutes. We're sitting at 3:21 and 14. Wait till you see what
I got to go visit grandkids. I got to go visit a bunch of grandkids. Yeah.
You got 12 of them. Sign off. I can't believe how wonderful this has been, and including let folks know where we can find your work, VVA, and all that stuff. So do your thing there, and I'll let Val do the closeout intro extra. And all I have to say to everybody is, like we did today, wake up in kindergarten every day. There is so much to learn and so little time, because before you know it, you're in first grade. God bless, God love everybody. Back to you guys.
James, over to you.
Yeah. So if you are interested in getting involved in working with veterans or following what we're doing, you can go to Vietnam Veterans. That's vva.org, vva.org. We're doing some incredible work, working on legislation that is going to, mandate things like biological research, into the children of veterans who have been exposed to toxins, chemicals, and vaccines. What's the long-term effects of that? We talked a lot about the vaccine issue and being forced to take vaccines. I can remember getting 30 shots basically in one day in basic training. So, how did that affect my children, my grandchildren? We've got a message to Secretary Kennedy right now, and we're hoping that he'll respond to that. We also work closely with the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, who's been very openly communicating. I tell people, go out and see it for yourself. Don't just listen to the media hype. Don't let somebody tell you what's going on. Personally speaking, my veterans access to veterans health care has improved in the last couple of months, especially as it relates to me being able to get an appointment quicker because they will send me out to veterans community health care much quicker than was done before. It usually would take 45 days or so. And in one case, I had an appointment for eyes that took well over a year. Well, they have outside groups that will do the exams now, and the VA takes care of it, and I can get it within days. Within days. So I think that's an overall improvement. Don't believe the hype. They haven't fired 80,000 people. They talk about it, everything's on the table, but they're looking at ways, what I believe, to improve system. And why do I tell you this? Not because I'm taking a side, not because our organization takes a side, but because we have seen the damaging effects to mental and physical health by the false information that's being put out. Literally, we have multiple people that have had to check themselves into the hospital having anxiety attacks, strokes, and even becoming suicidal, not because of what has happened, but because of the fear that's constantly put out on the media. And I'm thankful that we have people in positions now. The Secretary of Veterans Affairs, he comes out, he makes a statement all the time. Listen and watch him. Go ahead and ask him the questions. If you don't believe him, fine. But we've got to be truthful. Yeah,
Collins.
Secretary Collins. Yeah, absolutely. He's not just sitting in the office having once a month breakfast. He's going out into the field. So we can give him a list of 3 different places to go. He's going. I'm not, I can't tell you his itinerary, but I can tell you that we have scheduled meetings with him on the ground at areas that we've identified there's issues at. So what else can you get? Somebody that's willing to do that. So that the other thing is we're trying to honor a group of ladies that volunteered during the Vietnam War called Donut Dollies, and they worked for the American Red Cross. And people will say, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, the big deal is that the Vietnam War ended 50 years ago this year. This is the last group of volunteers that have never been truly recognized. And we believe that a congressional gold medal issued to these ladies, so over 680 volunteers, 3 of them died in their service overseas, that were volunteers, mainly all young women between the ages of 20 and 24 years old, went over, to carry out cups of coffee, traveled around the different areas. Absolutely, there it is. We actually have a call to action piece on there. So you can go in, you can pull it up on the VVA website, and you send a letter to your congressman, to your senator, please sign on. Well, not a lot of people have signed on because, they're too caught up in all of this other drama and nonsense that's going on. But this is very important. Most of these ladies are now obviously in their 70s and 80s. And what a shame to miss the opportunity to honor the ones that are still alive. What a disgraceful thing.
Yeah.
It's just as disgraceful as whenever you see people get the Medal of Honor 100 years after they've died. You know what I mean? And that's
Right.
happened, some of them from the Civil War and World War One.
Yeah.
And it's because we get caught up in things that really, the minutia of politics. But let's get into the heart of the matter here. The heart of the matter is honoring these ladies for what they
Mhm.
did, their valiant service, and you know, we stand behind that. And we really are pushing hard for biological research. We believe that historical preservation and the proper accounting of historical actions are important for the future. So you'll see in that we are big on the legacy side of things, you know, but you can't have a legacy. What is your legacy going to be? That you didn't tell the truth, that that you didn't learn anything from the Vietnam War.
Right.
You know, when we went to Iraq, we had to relearn tactics doing combat gun truck security missions because the Army refused to really implement some of those lessons learned. And so therefore, you know, you had to go through and redo it again. But that's the same generation that came up and helped us. So now, as they're at this point in their life, the least we can do, they gave them a terrible welcome home.
Mhm.
Their benefits were horrible when they first. The VA medical system was a Frankenstein movie in some places. Okay, and the only reason why we have a better system now is because of what those Vietnam veterans did in the 70s
Right.
and the 80s
That's
and the
right.
90s and the continuing to do today. And today, they're the older people in the room that are saying, stop this arguing. I mean, they're trying to pull these other veterans groups together so that they will work and unify and build bridges. You can't build bridges by taking a political, one sided stance. You have to be totally apolitical. Your focus is on the mission. The mission's to help veterans and their families. The mission's not to promote propaganda that is coming out from the media that is found to be false. When we started hearing all these reports of the disaster that's going on at the VA, we sent out a message to every one of our states, every one of our chapters, every one of our members. Give us a list of those things that you have seen that have gotten worse. And we got no complaints. We got rumors. Okay, but did that? No, well, it didn't happen to me, but this is what I heard. Okay, where was it at? And we'd go to try to find it. And the rumor turned out to be it was just reported in one media outlet and it
Right.
came from one source and there was no verification. You know, it's always when you go for the verification, it's always they said. Well, we want to know who they is, you know. So
You
that's the
said
one thing when you see that.
the donut dollies you talked about. This is real close to my heart. There are some alive, right? They're in their 80s or 90s. I'm assuming.
70s and 80s, yeah, they're
Hmm.
mainly in their late 70s and 80s,
Okay.
yeah, and they're beautiful ladies, and you know they're not asking for a pension, they're not asking for any of those things. What they're asking for is just a little recognition
Wow.
for
Wow.
what they did,
What are final
and you
thoughts
know,
for you, Captain? This has been truly amazing, amazing.
yep,
This show's going to have a lot of legs. It's going to get a lot of places.
yep.
Um, I love the Sunday show because we had time. I mean, you got to get to your grandkids.
I'm
Val's
going. I
really
got to get. I was supposed to be out 20 minutes ago,
Val's.
so I got to get
I'll
moving.
bet you Val's husband's knocking on the door and of the closet and stuff. But I just can't tell you how memorable this was for me and as a show. Wrap up just your final goodbye to the audience, and then Val, you take this show out. God bless you. We're going to talk. The only the 2 days I'm looking at right now to a broadcast is Sunday and Wednesdays. So
Okay.
stay tuned for maybe this Wednesday. You never know. You never know what we'll bring up because today it was 3 hours and over 3.5 hours, 3 hours, 31 minutes, 37 seconds. And the funny thing about it is what's not said yet, what's unsaid.
Yeah.
So God bless Captain McCormick. I'll be talking this week. Okay. You say hi
Yeah.
to you and your guys, to your
I will.
wonderful wife, and God bless you. Final sign off from you, and then Val close out the
Real
show.
quick, real quick. I just want to say that you know, God bless each and every one of you that are out there, wherever you may be listening. thank you for this opportunity to listen to this old soldier and the things that we have to put out. We think that it's important. We'd love to have people to join us in prayer. I would love to, to just say one real quick prayer, if it's okay with everybody. Father in heaven, we come to you today, Lord, and we thank you for the gift of salvation through the death, burial, and resurrection of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Thank you for this wonderful gift and the grace that you've given us and the ability to come out here today, Lord. We ask for your mercy and your protection, Lord. We ask for you to put us in positions to where we can spread your message and your love and your commitment to this country and to this world. Lord, we pray for peace in all homes, and we ask that you allow families to come together today and to be united in love and happiness. In Jesus Christ's name, we all pray. Amen. Thanks a lot, folks.
Amen.
God bless you. I'm going to pop
Amen.
smoke now.
First,
Amen.
there was Dueling Citizens, now Secrets from the Inside. Author Greg Meakin nails it again. Introducing Secrets from the Inside Radio Show. Raw, unscripted, uncensored, uncanceled. Secrets from the Inside starts now.
You got me headed to the left, headed to the right, headed back and forth, but baby, it's alright. You got me going to the east, going to the west, going up and down, 'cause baby, you know best. All day, all night, running around. I'm never gonna stop because you never settle down. You got me shooting into space, flying at the sun. I'm never coming back 'cause baby, you're the one.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Easter.